Okay, you're listening to the Royal Rant. I'm Ryan. My partner in crime, Tim, is a healthy scratch today, so I'm gonna have to skate some extra minutes today. But I'm glad to tell you that we have a special guest, Austin Stanowich, who writes for the Hockey News, and you're the content editor also, right, on the site?
I actually moved over to the Sporting Tribune recently. I'm
Oh, I'm
I'm a columnist
sorry.
for the Sporting Tribune.
Sporting Tribune. Okay, sorry about that. You were
No
with
worries.
Hockey News for a
Right.
while.
Yeah.
Okay, so as we always do on this podcast, we talk about the LA Kings, also sometimes other stuff. I guess in the other stuff category, I guess we have to congratulate the 2024 LA Dodgers, world champs. Are you a baseball fan?
I'm not a huge baseball fan, but I was at crypto for the game winning game, which was one of the coolest experiences I've ever had at a hockey game. It was
Yeah,
surreal.
that looked great. I mean, the clips of that was awesome. Too bad I wasn't there for that, but yeah, that was, I mean, honestly, that team, I didn't think they had a chance to pull it off with just all the injuries and everything. And of course, they've always telling us like, hey, just make the playoffs and anything's can happen. And kind of turned out that way. And the team with the best record actually won the World Series, which doesn't actually happen very often. So definitely thankful for that. They had a cool parade, cool ceremony at Dodger Stadium. That was great. Hopefully the Kings are the Kings going to be able to have a parade uh, next year?
I wouldn't put any money on it, but like you said, you get in the playoffs and kind of anything can happen.
Exactly. So obviously this what we're going to talk about today, a really small sample size, right? I mean, there were 12 games in? No, 15 games?
12 games, yeah.
12 games. So 6-3-3. So 15 points, second place. Kind of looks good on paper. The question, is it fool's gold at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I hate to be coming on and being a negative Nancy's calling it fool's gold, but it's a good point about the sample size. Especially, I think five of the games have been against teams that finished in the bottom five last year. They've got San Jose twice, Anaheim. They just played Chicago and they got Montreal. So you don't want to get too invested in this team's fantastic. They're going to finish second in the Pacific because they're at 12 games in. We're not there yet. There has been some good signs though. I think that obviously some of the young guys have really stepped up in a big way. There hasn't been a significant regression from any of the more veteran players, which is always a big plus. But there are obviously the warning signs too. The goaltending maybe hasn't been as good as you would hope, and inconsistency. Again, it's just 12 games, but this hasn't been, we saw them look incredible on Wednesday against Vegas. They took it to what I think could be one of the better teams in the league this season, and then they kind of just screw the pooch against a terrible Blackhawks team. So you're kind of trying to figure out right now which one's the real team. Is it the team that, pummels the Golden Knights, or is it the team that can't hold a lead against the Chicago Blackhawks?
That's a great point. Yeah, there was I don't know, there was a vibe about that game at the end of the first period. I think I sent a text to my brother saying, I feel like they're going to lose this game. They're going to blow this game just because they had so many chances in the first to get a two, maybe even a three-goal lead, and they couldn't do it. And I guess I jinxed them, but I felt like, you know what? They're going to blow this game.
Yeah, I mean, and Jim Hiller even mentioned that second half of the first period is where he thought they lost the game. And I said during the game, they let that Blackhawks team kind of hang around. And if you let a team hang around in this league, you're just tempting fate there, and that's in kind of what happened.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't matter where somebody's at in the standings. I mean, if you just don't bury chances and let them hang around, you're going to get burned. It's the best league in the world for a reason, and you can't overlook anybody, the Sharks or Blackhawks and speaking of which, they're going to be playing the Predators, and they're not doing so well right now, and obviously, they're going to have to bring their A game to beat them too. So you mentioned not a lot of regression, and I guess Kopitar would figure in there because he's got 13 points, 12 games. It'd be great if he just kept that pace for the whole year. Because I think we had a podcast on here where I think the title was, "Is Kopi going to turn into dust at some point?" Just because you know he plays so many minutes, and he's not a spring chicken anymore, but he's just always so consistent. But it feels like if you're a Kings fan, in the long run, you have to wonder, like, the post Kopi, what is that going to look like, and how many years can he keep doing this?
Yeah, I mean, it's the big question because eventually it will happen. I mean, Father Time catches up to every player in every sport, and there's going to be that time where Kobe can't do it anymore. And this season's been a weird one for him because, like you said, 13 points in 12 games. You can't turn your nose up at the raw production, but the underlings have been as bad as I've seen them from Andre Kopitar, right? Like the Kings aren't winning their minutes from like a shots on net and a chances standpoint, but they're outscoring the opposite. So you're kind of trying to, again, we got everything comes with the context of small sample size, but they are outscoring the opponent with them on the ice, but they aren't really winning those minutes. So we are looking at that, you know, over 40, 50, 60, 82 games where what's going to be the truth again? Like, is it going to be that they're just going to keep outscoring the opposition with Kopitar on the ice because that's what he does? That's what he's done for 18 years. Is he going to continue to do it? Or are those kind of underlying issues going to rear their head and eventually take over? And
Right.
that is maybe for me in these first 12 games the biggest concern, because if it does go the wrong way for this Kings team, they're in a lot of trouble if their first line is consistently losing their matchups. You can't win hockey games in this league with that happening.
Exactly. And another, well, I guess I can throw it in the regression category up to this point. It's kind of like Byfield.
Yeah.
No goals, 5 points. What is there anything that we can attribute that to, or
Yeah, I mean, Byfield's been an interesting case for me because I've since the day they drafted him, I've been a big believer in this player. I think that the toolkit is so unique. I think there's a lot to like about the player, and I think we saw last year how good he can be, but we definitely have not seen at the beginning of the season. I do think that he's a player that at every level, when he has to do something new, it takes him a while to figure it out. Like when he got to the OHL, it took him half a season to really get going, and then he put up, I mean, near historic numbers at that level. At the AHL level, it took him again half a season to really adjust to that, and then he was one of the best players for that Ontario Reign team. And we've seen that at every level. He's obviously played center before, but it's been a while. He hasn't had a lot of experience playing center at the NHL level, and I think that it's possible that we're just gonna have to be 20 or 30 games of him figuring it out. Like he's a very toolsy player, and
Mhm.
I don't want to say he's not a smart player. He's a very smart player, but he's not the elite hockey IQ of like an Andre Kopitar or even an Alex Turcotte on this team. So it might just take a little bit of time. They need that little bit of patience for him to really adjust back to the center ice position. It's a different game at center ice. Like you're covering the full 200 feet. You're having to grind in the faceoff circle, which takes a lot out of your body, and then you're having to kind of make those bursts up and down the ice that he can do. And I think he just needs to settle into. He doesn't need to. There's a little too much hero puck going on. I think he knows that there's a big spotlight on him, and he's got a big role. And I think he's maybe trying to do too much, which we've seen from the past. He's at his best when he's playing a simple game, using the
Mhm.
speed, the size, and all that to get in and around the net. So I think once he gets back to doing that, and maybe gets those 20 to 30 games, like I said, we'll see him really take over and be the player we can be. At least I think so. And they need him to be.
They definitely that because that was kind of one of the things in the off season, like that we've talked about here, is like they're gonna go as far as he plays,
Yeah.
really, because they really need him to build on, because had the breakout season last year and kind of needs to do something similar or maybe improve on that to help them be a contender. So is there any news on Doughty's return?
From what I understand, it's still the same timeline it's been. They're expecting right around December, probably middle of December. More cautiously, they'll get him back and into the lineup, and then you never know how a guy's going to return from that. If there's a guy I would expect to hit the ground running, it's probably Drew Doughty. The guy's been a gamer his whole career. I don't expect him to have any period of time where you can tell he's not playing at 100%. Like I think that come around mid-December, maybe even closer to, I think mid-December is probably where I would shoot for. I think he'll come back and he'll be as good as he's ever been, or well, not as good as as good as he's gonna be, basically.
Yeah, and that would be a huge addition, obviously. I mean, I guess if they could kind of hang around and still be in the kind of playoff position for his return, that would be a huge thing. And yeah, like you said, I'm sure he's just so eager to get back at it, knowing the way he is, just living and breathing hockey and everything. But so I wanted to ask, the Kings they made a lot of acquisitions over the off season, Burrows, Edmondson, Fogel, From that group, like what's your takeaway from those acquisitions up to this point?
Yeah, I think they've kind of all been the player I expected them to be. I think Warren Fogel's a good middle six option. He plays the game really fast, plays in north-south game, and he's kind of a good complement to the two other. Like, you're never going to get Warren Fogel to carry a line for you, but if you can put him on a line that's going well, he's going to make them better. Tanner Jeannot, I think there was maybe too much expectation on Tanner Jeannot. I think people are still dreaming on that 20 goal guy we saw in his first season in Nashville, and that was probably never going to be the case. Like, the offense just has not been there for him, but he's been on their fourth line. He's been by far and away the most physical player on this team, probably the most physical player they've had in a while. I mean,
Hmm.
since at least Brendan Lemieux, I think he's a pretty significant upgrade on Brendan Lemieux. And then
Yeah.
Edmonton's probably been the guy I've been most impressed by in how much better he's been than I think a lot of people expected. I mean, he's been pretty good for the role he's played. I mean, you can the contract talk is a different one. I still probably not a great contract, but for 12 games into the season, I don't think you can ask much more from Joel Edmondson what he's done. I mean, he's already got 3 goals. I think he still leads the team in goals for defensemen. So I mean, you can't really complain too much. But he's been that consistent partner next to Brant Clark to kind of be the safety valve in case Clark gets himself into trouble, which is going to happen.
Exactly. Yeah, I've been surprised with Edmondson,
Yeah,
because not to belabor the contract thing, but it did kind of surprise us that like, wow, 4 years and what's going on here? Because I thought we wanted to be getting quicker on the blue line and younger and but yeah, so far, he's kind of held his own and played some important minutes. And yeah, I agree with you. I think we talked about it on this podcast that 27 goal season. I mean, I don't think that's ever gonna happen again.
no,
I imagine that the front office probably thought that, right? But brought him in more for toughness and grit, because that seemed to be something that they felt was lacking.
yeah,
And so I guess we'll see. Should they make the playoffs, having that sandpaper, is that gonna help get
yeah.
them past the first round, for the first time in 3 years? So you mentioned Brant Clark. Are you surprised by what he's doing, or is this kind of what you expected to see from him?
I, I don't want to say I'm surprised because I think that we knew that Brant Clark offensively was this player. Like, I think I said even at the beginning of this, or before the season started, even like with the puck on his stick, Brant Clark is a top tier NHL defenseman. We know that. I mean, the vision, the puck skills, all that stuff has always been there. I think what's impressed me most is the way he's I don't want to say the way he's defended because there's been some problems, but I think a lot of people hear about Brant Clark and they think that you hear he's not a great defender and people assume he's just going to be getting dangled off the rush and he can't handle 1v1s. All he's handled those things a lot better than I was anticipating. There's
Hmm.
still the problems. He's not very strong in the corners. He's not great in front of his own net yet, which is fine for a player. But I think that what surprised me is how well he's handled the defensive side of the puck, especially in defending players attacking with speed. Because that was always my big concern with him with his skating problems is how is he going to handle NHL players attacking with speed? And he's handled it really well. And then again, once you get the puck on that guy's stick, you don't have many worries. As much as Jim Hiller likes to talk about that risk in his game, I personally do not care whatsoever about the risk. Trust that guy with the puck at all times.
Well, I mean, he's got 11 points in 12 games. I mean, it's just, the Kings, when was the last time they had a defenseman who was kind of a point a game defenseman? I mean, it's something that was sorely needed in the organization. So, and hopefully, and I'm sure, he's young, he'll address some of those other issues, board play and being stronger on his stick in front of the net and stuff like that. But yeah, that was definitely it's great to see that from him. And then also, what are we to make of Alex Laferriere? 8 goals.
Yeah, I mean he's been fantastic. The pucks just keeps going in for him, and that'll slow down, right? I don't. He's on pace for like 54 goals. I don't think we should ever expect Alex Laferriere to score 54 goals. The great thing about Laferriere, though, and it's something Jim Hiller kind of touched on after the last game, he doesn't need to score 50 goals to be an impactful player for this team. He plays a pretty responsible game. He gets in on the forecheck really well. He's a nice complement to his line mates, and I really like the shift they made for him on his line. did not like him on the first line with Kopitar and Kempe. I just don't think he was a fit with those guys who kind of need someone who can carry the puck a little bit more like a Byfield or a Turcotte can do. And
Hmm.
he was still scoring in those first couple games with those guys. I didn't think that line was going very well. And then they switch him to the line first with Turcotte and Fogle, now Byfield and Fogle, that I think is perfect for him because LaFerriere can just get in on the forecheck, he can hunt pucks, and then he can look for open space and just he doesn't have to play. It sounds like a backhanded compliment almost, but like you don't necessarily want him with the puck on his stick at all times. That's not the kind of player he is. And in his current setup, he doesn't need the puck on his stick very much. He
Hmm.
can just get to spaces, get the puck, get it off, and put the puck in the back of the net, which is what he's best at. I think he's certainly exceeded expectations, and it'll be interesting to see how he can maintain that or if he can maintain that across, again, 30, 40, 60 games. And if he can, I mean, the Kings have quite a player on their hands.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and I think, I think people kind of underestimate his shot. He's got an above average shot, and I agree with you. I'd like to see him finding space for that shot and not necessarily carrying the puck too much. But
Yeah.
I think just yesterday, I was kind of watching him a lot, and I was kind of impressed with just, his play along the boards also, and not necessarily hitting people, knocking people through the glass, but finishing checks, using his stick to take pucks
Mhm.
away. To me, he's gotten really good at lifting sticks and taking pucks, and then, getting that puck on somebody's stick, and also, back checking,
Yeah.
breaking up plays. I mean, it might be a stretch to call him, 200-foot player, but he does show that in terms of willingness to get back on the back check. And so, yeah, I mean, is he going to score 54 goals? Why not? Let's dream a little.
I like that. Yeah, I mean, it takes me back to when he came into camp last year and was so impressive talking to Jim Fox, and he kept repeating like this guy just looks like a hockey player. You watch
Yeah.
him, and that is what you want out of a hockey player, and I think that was the case last year. But then you didn't really have the payoff. Like that was all you could say is, man, when you watch him, it looks so good, but there's maybe not the production to match it. Now he still looks that good and does all those little things you're talking about, and he's producing. And when you get that combination, you have a very, very impactful player for your team.
Yeah, and to me, he looks confident, like, not overconfident, not cocky, but there seems to be a composure factor this season that I don't know, maybe wasn't quite all the way there last year, but I think he also feels like, he's an NHLer, and I think it shows in the way he's playing, and it's, obviously great. Um,
Yeah, I mean, he talked about. I've talked to him a few times now about the goal scoring. He said one of the biggest things is that added composure and patience. He felt like he was really rushing his shot last year, and he was shooting into shin pads a lot. And now he's found that kind of composure and that confidence to maybe hold on to the puck for that extra
Mhm.
half second to open up a shooting lane, which is, I mean, that little half a second, that little half a stick length is massive in the NHL.
Right, I was gonna say that's the difference between being an Ovechkin and,
Yeah,
being Tanner Jeannot.
yeah,
Well, maybe that's a bit of a stretch, but yeah, that kind of composure and holding on the puck. And yeah, so but yeah, we, as you talked about in the intro, I guess, maybe like a potential red flag here is the fact that, they really haven't played a lot of good teams yet. And you meant, Toronto. I get, they're a contender and they handily kind of smoke the Kings. Um, Vegas, we've kind of had two blowouts now back, where the Kings had one, Vegas had one. So it's kind of hard to see how they'll match up with them. Normally they have close games, and but so we will, I guess that'll be something coming up when they start playing more, in division contenders and other, powers in the Western Conference to see kind of where they're at. It was kind of hard to figure out. Even last year, it was hard to kind of figure out what they were last year, up to a certain point. But for us Kings fans, we'll just have to hope that Byfield will kind of put it together sooner rather than later, because they need that production, right? That Kopi continues on this pace, that Drew comes back and is ready to contribute, right away. And hopefully that Clark just continues. Are you concerned about Jordan Spence at all? He was a healthy scratch earlier, and
No, I wouldn't say I'm concerned with Jordan Spence. I think the healthy scratch situation was obviously not ideal. I don't think that's what I would have done if I was in that position, is healthy scratch the guy. But again, I think it's always important when a situation like that to we don't know maybe what's going on behind the scenes. That could
Hmm.
have easily been a situation where Jim Hiller talks to him, is like, "Hey, we put you in bad spots. We really harmed you these first couple games. We want you to just take a night off to reset." And so it might not have been a punishment thing. There's a whole lot of reasons a player could get healthy scratch there, and I think it's clear that the top pair right defenseman role was too much for Jordan Spence, which I don't think should necessarily be shocking or even a big indictment on Jordan Spence. Like, that's just not the player he was probably ever going to be. He was always probably asking too much of him to play that role,
Hmm.
and that's kind of what we saw since moving back into a more fitting role for him, kind of either whether it's the RD2 or RD3, depending on the night. I think he's looked back to the player that he is. He's just a good quality guy that can help you on both sides of the ice. Maybe leans a little more offensive, but I think that Jordan Spence very rarely hurts you, and more often than not helps you. And I think that's still been the case, despite those first couple games where he was trying to fill Drew's skates were a little bit rough for him for sure. But I'm
Right.
not concerned about him going forward.
Right. I mean, I'm kind of surprised that, some of the puck hasn't gone into the net for him a little more because he has good at least from my
Yeah.
point of view, he seems to have good instincts about when to shoot. He seems to be able to get the puck through on net and has a pretty decent shot. I feel like not necessarily snake bit, but it would seem like I was expecting him to score some goals at some point.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think a couple games ago I was talking to Zach Dooley, and he said that he's like, I don't know if the math's perfect. I was doing it on my own, but last season it was like 41% of Spence's shots got blocked, and this season it's down to 20. So I mean, he's basically cut that in half. So definitely the
That's huge. Yeah.
ability, yeah, it's massive. The ability to get those pucks through is huge, and like you said, you would think that at some point that starts leading to goals. Like Joel Edmondson, like we said, has three, and a lot of that's just been by getting pucks to the net. And even if it's not Jordan Spence scoring, you would think eventually that'll lead to goals for the team, whether that's on rebounds, hitting people in front. Like, it's such a good quality for a defenseman to have, to consistently get pucks through shin pads and just to the net. Like, that's 90% of the battle, just getting it on net. You don't always have to snipe from the blue line, but just get it there, and good things generally happen. So for
Right.
sure, I think you're right. I think that eventually, as he keeps doing that, we'll see the payoff at some point.
Yeah, because that would also be huge. If you could get some production from him and Clark keeps doing this, that could, be a whole new dynamic, for the Kings. So we talked about the Spence healthy scratch. The other huge healthy scratch in the elephant of the healthy scratch in the room is Kevin Fiala. What happened there?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough thing, right? Because the optics on it were so bad. It happened right after he got benched for the third period of a game against who was that against? Now I'm blanking on who they were playing when he got benched, but he got benched in the third period, and then they go to San Jose and he doesn't play. I mean, we kind of have to take him at his word that he just slept through his alarm, and then that's the kind of I don't think there was anything, you know, Jim Hiller's not singling Kevin Fiala out, and, you're a problem and we need to send this message to you. I think that he got benched for the stick infractions, which Jim Hiller had said before. After the first San Jose game, he said we need to address these directly. We're taking too many of them. Fiala takes two of them, two pretty dumb ones, frankly, which is not uncommon for him. And Jim Hiller sits him, which I think is fair across the board. I'm sure Fiala wasn't happy to be benched for the third period of a game, but I don't think that's abnormal or a crazy thing for Jim Hiller to do. And then he
Mhm.
missed a meeting, and you're no one's above the law, so he has to sit for a game, and he comes back. He responds in, I think, a good way against Vegas. He has a really good game, and these kinds of things, I think, just happen on a team. Like that, guys are going to make mistakes. There's consequences for those mistakes, and then you move on. I mean, at some point, I just have to, we have to take Jim Hiller and Kevin Fiala at their word that things happen. Like Jim Hiller said, nothing, none of it was malicious or intentional to be a bad teammate from Kevin Fiala. He made a few mistakes. They addressed them, and it's gone. And it's they're done with that. It's time to move forward for them.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, if you're in Hiller's shoes, he's singled out the fact that there's too many stick infractions, and then, he kind of forced his hand where he had to do something, right? Because, what's the rest of the team going to think? Like if he doesn't actually take action on what he's just
Yeah,
saying. So,
100. Yeah, I think that it was actually I was impressed that Jim Hiller did stick to his word to that extent to say I don't care who you are, I don't care how many points you have, Kevin Fiala. If we just talked about this, and if you're not gonna kind of buy in on this thing, again, it doesn't matter who you are, you're gonna take a seat on the bench. As Tom McClellan put it last year, he's not afraid to weld asses to benches, and Hiller made the point.
and that's the thing too. I mean, he had that issue with McClellan last season as
Mhm.
well. So it's not like a new thing for him. So hopefully and then after kind of being in the doghouse last season, he did clean that up for pretty much the rest of the season,
Mhm.
and not taking, because another thing he seemed to be, taking penalties in the offensive zone, which is just, kind of brutal.
Yeah.
So hopefully, that'll be sorted. Well, great. I think we had, thanks for catching us up with what's going on with the Kings. I don't want to keep you too much longer on this weekend. You got anything planned for today?
No, no, but it's a day off after the kind of a long day at crypto for the 1 o'clock game yesterday. So I'm just gonna relax for the rest of the day. A lazy Sunday.
Well, that sounds great. And I appreciate you coming on, and I hope we can have a chance to do this again and hopefully catch up at a future Kings game or something.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to.
All right. Thanks so much.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.